Hello and welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. I'm your host, Tigers beat writer Evan Petzold, and this week I am joined by Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report, co-hosting for the fifth week in a row. Chris, thank you for joining me once again.
Absolutely, always fun.
Digging into this week for the Tigers, it was a 3-3 record this past week during 6 games on the road in New York and Miami. It was a 2-1 record versus the New York Yankees at Yankee Stadium. It was a 1-2 record versus the Miami Marlins at Lone Depot Park. Facing the Yankees, 12-2 win on Tuesday, 11-1 win on Wednesday. Those were fun games. And then a 9-3 loss on Thursday. Facing the Marlins, an 8-2 loss on Friday, a 6-4 loss on Saturday, and a 2-0 win on Sunday. The Tigers had a 26-31 record in 57 games since July 9th. They've also lost 12 of their last 19 games, but they're still atop the American League Central. Also, since July 9th, the Tigers rank 18th in MLB in winning percentage, whereas the Cleveland Guardians, an opponent we are going to be talking a lot about on this show, rank 3rd. They have a 36-23 record since July 9th. So Cleveland playing really good ball, Detroit not so much. But the big news of this past week was the Tarik Skubal injury that wasn't an injury. In Friday's 8-2 loss to the Marlins, Tarik Skubal felt tightness in his left side after throwing a pitch. He motioned to the dugout and he pulled himself out of the game in the 4th inning. We saw a brief conversation with AJ Hinch, the manager, Kelly Rose, the athletic trainer, out there on the mound, and then Tarik Skubal exits the game. He felt tightness in his ribcage area on his left side. One day later, the Tigers delivered the news that the medical exam showed no structural damage. Here's what manager AJ Hinch said, quote, "It's all good news. The scan came back clean," end quote. Just like that, Tarik Skubal is scheduled to start Thursday's series finale against the Guardians at Comerica Park. Crisis averted?
Well, we'll see. I mean, it depends on how he looks heading into his next start. That was certainly, you've talked about the postseason panic meter, and I've tried to stay calm in the medium range, only medium level of panic. But it spiked into the red when that happened. It was like, oh no. Because obviously, like when we've talked about the playoffs, I keep pointing back to, well, you got Tarik Skubal, you got the best pitcher, so that's going to give you an advantage. If you don't have Tarik Skubal, then obviously you have no advantage there. So that's the best news anybody could possibly hope for there. It's still, it gives you a little bit of pause in that road trip. Like generally speaking, you go 500 on the road trip, you feel pretty happy about it, but they take different shapes, right? And that one started out with those 2 blowout wins over the Yankees. It felt like, hey, the Tigers might pick it up and sprint to the finish and really close this out. And then the next 4 games were all bummers. And honestly, the pitching was great on Sunday, so we give them credit there, but that was a gift win. The Marlins kicked the ball around the field and the offense couldn't do anything. And so it's hard to come out of that stretch feeling great, but there's always the next game and you look forward to that.
And you certainly feel a lot better coming out of the road trip knowing that Tarik Skubal is healthy, expected to make his next start. And you're right, we'll see how it goes, but the numbers do not lie for Tarik Skubal. It is a 2.26 ERA in 29 starts with 28 walks and 224 strikeouts across 183 and 1/3 innings. He leads the American League with that 2.26 ERA. Then you got Boston Red Sox left-hander Garrett Crochet. He's got a 2.63 ERA. Does not lead the American League in ERA. That belongs to Tarik Skubal, but Garrett Crochet does lead MLB in both innings and strikeouts. However, he has 30 starts compared to Tarik Skubal's 29 starts. That is the AL Cy Young race. I'm expecting both pitchers to probably make 2 more starts, so Skubal should finish with 31 starts. Crochet should finish with 32 starts. And then we'll see how the DBWAA voters with a Cy Young vote, how they decide on who ultimately ends up winning that. I still think Tarik Skubal has the edge there, but Garrett Crochet, he's been pitching good ball as well. And Tarik Skubal, if he would have been hurt, if he would have been injured, and let's say he would have missed the rest of the season, I don't know how you could have given the Cy Young to anyone other than Garrett Crochet. So with Tarik Skubal healthy, good for Tarik Skubal, good for the Tigers, and good for those postseason hopes, keeping the World Series dreams alive. Taking a look at the MLB standings update, we'll take a look at the playoff picture as well. I just mentioned the Guardians a couple of times, but the Tigers are gearing up to play the Cleveland Guardians. More importantly, it is 6 games in 10 days against the Guardians. Right now, the Tigers have an 85-65 record for first place in the American League Central, sitting 6.5 games ahead of the Guardians. Also, the Tigers are in second place in the American League, trailing the Toronto Blue Jays by 2.5 games. If the season ended right now, The 6 playoff teams from the American League would be the AL East leading Toronto Blue Jays, the AL Central leading Detroit Tigers, the AL West leading Seattle Mariners, and the 3 wildcard teams, the New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox, and Houston Astros. But we still have 2 weeks left in the regular season. The Tigers currently slated as the number 2 seed in the American League, which would mean a bye to the best of 5 ALDS, where they would await the winner of the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox. As for that final wildcard spot, the Texas Rangers, they're 2 games back. The Cleveland Guardians, they're 2.5 games back. Both of those teams within striking distance of a postseason spot. You referenced the panic meter, so I'm going to bring it up again. I think it's going to be a show-by-show thing that we discuss, but where is it at in terms of the postseason performance? Again, we know the Tigers are going to get into the postseason. They're all but guaranteed already. They actually have a chance to clinch the American League Central coming up in this 3-game series against the Guardians, so they could take care of business right here, right now. But when it comes to looking ahead, the Tigers against the Yankees, the Tigers against the Red Sox, whoever it may be, what is your panic meter? Is it low? Is it medium? Or is it high after what we've seen from the Tigers, not only in this past road trip, but also really since like the middle of July?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's always going to be at medium until they're down 0-2 in a series or something like that. Because, I mean, obviously the intensity is ratcheted up in the playoffs. There's more strategy involved. It's different. But at the same time, you look at the playoffs as just another series, honestly. And so the Tigers head into Yankee Stadium this past week and you go, well, this could be rough. And they win the first 2 games. And if that's the playoffs, you feel outstanding. You're like, okay, we've got the advantage here. We just have to win 1 of the next 3 or 2 of the next 4, 5. So it's just the way it is. Like you can go into a playoff series feeling very confident. The Tigers did in 2006 and again in 2012, and everything can flip on a dime in such a short amount of time. Now, if you just line up the rosters side by side and look at the players and the performance, you go, well, the Tigers are at a disadvantage here, but it's baseball. Like it's a lot of times it's just kind of a coin flip, like maybe 55%, 45% one way or the other. So I remain medium level of panic. And like I said, if once they start losing, then I'll panic a little bit more. But I think you just got to get there. And the Tigers have done a pretty good job of that. And you just need to finish out these last 2 weeks and try to secure one of these top 2 spots. It's going to be tough to get that top spot now, but get one of the top 2 and I think you're in a good position.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Get one of the top 2 and you're going to be all right. But my panic meter, I think it was high last week because I was freaking out a little bit. Maybe it's somewhere between medium and high right now. I really do go back to the offense and what the Tigers have. I mean, you've got so many offensive producers. You mentioned like lining up the roster side by side. And yes, the Tigers probably at a disadvantage aside from Tarik Skubal on the pitching side, whether it's the rotation or the bullpen when you line them up with what the Yankees have done or what the Red Sox have done. But I do look at the offense and I'm like, man, Riley Green, like he can hit. Gleyber Torres, he can hit. Spencer Torkelson, I mean, this guy's approaching 30 home runs once again. Colt Keith, I mean, this guy is just a hitter in the batter's box. Like you look up and down Kerry Carpenter and the slug that he provides as well. I mean, Kerry Carpenter, if he turns it on in the last 2 weeks, he could end up with 30 home runs as well. And yeah, I mentioned Riley Green, 34 home runs, 108 RBIs. He's done it all. And then you have other contributors. You have guys like Dylan Dingler and Zach McKinstry. You had Javier Baez for a stretch earlier when he was good. You got Wenzel Perez, who continues to get big hits in big moments. We've seen that time and time again. Parker Meadows, we know what he can do when he's on. And then you have, your guys coming off the bench, your right-handed hitters who slay those lefty pitchers in Andy Ibanez and Jahmai Jones and maybe even Justin Henry Malloy if he's back up at a certain point. So when I think about the Tigers going into the postseason, my panic meter is very high when it comes to the pitching, but it's low when it comes to the offense. Because I think across the season, we've seen these guys produce over and over. And yes, some individuals had some lulls. And yes, the team as a whole maybe strikes out a little bit too much. But at the same time, well, that's fueled by Riley Green, and that guy's got 34 home runs. So I'm okay with Riley Green with the strikeouts as long as he's hitting for power. And also Riley Green hitting 265 as well. So it's not like this guy is hitting 215 or near the Mendoza line. Riley Green is hitting the ball and moving it forward. Yes, he does have the strikeouts, but he's got a lot of pop too. So I'm not as worried about the Tigers as I was last week, just because I think I've calmed down a little bit. But yeah, probably somewhere in between medium and high for the panic meter, just because of where the pitching is at. That's really still my only concern with this team.
I've always had this working theory, and I've never really dug into it. I mean, I have a little bit, but I go back to Delman Young, who seemed to consistently perform in the playoffs, even though he swung at everything. And I feel sometimes like if you swing at everything, you're better off in the playoffs, because I feel like the pitchers are a little bit less likely to throw it out of the zone. They the last thing they want to do is walk people in the postseason. So it wouldn't shock me if Javi Baez in the postseason goes off, right? Because suddenly they want to throw him that outside slider, but they're a little bit worried about walking him, and it's not quite as outside as it should be, and he goes bonkers. Maybe he does it. Maybe he strikes out 14 times or whatever. It's just this thing in my head where sometimes these guys who swing at everything become the most dangerous hitters because they just, it's a small sample.
I know the Tigers would love to have a big Javier Baez performance in the postseason. That would really make a big difference for this team. All right, question one of the big two. The Tigers had a 6.5 game lead over the Guardians in the AL Central, but the Tigers have to play 6 games in 10 days against the Guardians with a 3-game series beginning Tuesday at Comerica Park. What are your expectations for this showdown? Tuesday, we have Casey Mize versus Joey Cantillo. Wednesday, we have Jack Flaherty versus TBD. Could be Logan Allen. Thursday, we have Tarik Skubal versus TBD. Could be Gavin Williams. For me, worry about yourself. That's where I'm at. And by that, I mean, don't worry about the Guardians. Worry about the Tigers. I'm interested to see how the starting pitching performs in these 3 games. Casey Mize, he threw 5 innings of 1-run ball against the Mets, then 6 innings of 2-run ball against the Yankees. Full starts with 0 walks. Can he make it 3 good starts in a row? Jack Flaherty, he threw 5 scoreless innings on 2 hits and 1 walk with 7 strikeouts against the Yankees. Can he make it 2 good starts in a row? And then you have Tarik Skubal coming off his shortest start since September 30th, 2021. Can he bounce back without any issues coming off of a game where he exited with an injury? And it turned out it wasn't an injury, but at the same time, he came out because he didn't feel right. And so can he bounce back from that without any issues? I think the Tigers need either Casey Mize or Jack Flaherty to emerge as their number 2 starter in the postseason. I think the Tigers will give the ball to Jack Flaherty in game 2, but if there's ever a time for Casey Mize to grab that thing and run with it, it's right now. And then let's see how Tarik Skubal bounce back in the series finale. So Casey Mize on Tuesday, Jack Flaherty on Wednesday, Tarik Skubal on Thursday. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing, is how does this starting pitching hold up? Chris, what are you looking forward to in this 3-game series? But not only the 3-game series, the 6 games in 10 days against the Guardians with the AL Central on the line.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever quite understand how Cleveland does this. That you look at it, they have the 3rd worst offense in baseball, an 85 WRC plus. That's 20% worse than the Tigers this year. And they're 9-1 in their last 10 games. And, you could say it's the pitching, and they do have like the 6th best ERA, but their fielding independent pitching is basically the same as the Tigers. They're both middle of the pack. So I like I said, I don't get it. They have José Ramírez, right? He's probably a Hall of Famer. Stephen Kwan is super annoying, but, very good player. It's very frustrating for Tigers fans, I think. And then you got Kyle Manzardo, who's kind of had a breakout this year, but he's essentially like a left-handed Torkelson, right? He's got 25 plus homers, hitting 240-ish. So other than that, they don't really have any offensive threats. So you feel like you got the Tigers, like this is who you line up to want to face them. Mize, Flaherty, Skubal. And realistically speaking, like it's a little scary with a 6.5 lead and 6 games to play head to head, but you win 2 of those and it's over. Because right now, every win against Cleveland drops 2 off your magic number. And I think the magic number is 7 right now, possibly 6. I never really know how the magic number works. I wish there was a magic number calculator somewhere. There probably is. So yeah, you win 2 of those and it's pretty much over. So obviously, you like to get it out of the way as soon as possible. But I agree with you. I think the most important thing is to see how Mize and Flaherty are pitching. And in that Skubal start, it's going to be probably the most scrutinized Skubal start in years because, we're going to make sure that he's fine and it'd be nice to have him go out there and throw another 7 shutout innings and lock up the Cy Young and lock up the division. And then I think Tigers fans will feel better about it.
Yeah. As for what this means for the AL Central, 6 games in 10 days can be really important, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be important if the Tigers just take care of business. The magic number is 7, yes, but the Tigers can clinch the AL Central if they sweep the Guardians in this upcoming 3-game series, because the season series between the Tigers and the Guardians is currently 4-3 in favor of the Tigers, which means a 3-game sweep would make it 7-3 in favor of the Tigers, clinching the 13-game season series and thus clinching the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Guardians if that ends up mattering for the AL Central title. So the Tigers can take care of business and win the AL Central with a 3-game sweep in this upcoming series. Tigers haven't won the AL Central in a very long time. That's pretty significant, but you have to take care of business for that to happen. What if the Tigers don't take care of business? The Tigers have 12 games left with 6 against the Guardians. The Guardians have 13 games left with 6 against the Tigers. To tie the Tigers by the end of the season, the Guardians must win 7 more games than the Tigers. And obviously the Guardians would have to secure the head-to-head tiebreaker in that process as well. So if the Tigers go 3-9, then the Guardians must go 10-3. Or if the Tigers go 7-5, then the Guardians must go 12-1. Those are just a couple of examples for the Guardians to tie the Tigers by the end of the season. And then along with that, they would also have to have the head-to-head tiebreaker, which the Tigers currently holds 4-3. But again, the Tigers can just take care of business by sweeping the Guardians with Casey Mize, Jack Flaherty, and Tarik Skubal in the next 3 days, winning the AL Central. That would be ideal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you want to see. And yeah, I mean, I'll never rule anything out after what the Tigers pulled off last year, but we're talking like a 2-week span here. It gets really hard. And to your point, just go out there and play good baseball, throw strikes, catch the ball, work good at bats. And if you play quality baseball, you're going to win at least one of these games. And again, like if you just win 2 of these final 6, I think you're fine. Obviously, winning 3, I think you'd feel a lot more comfortable. And you'd like to see the fans show up, right? This is a pennant race, but at the same time, it's a midweek series. And it's like football season now, right? People suddenly have just turned their gaze across the street to Ford Field. But still, it'd be cool to see big crowds down there and really kind of closing this out with help from the fans.
All right, let's get into question 2 of the big 2. Who are the Tigers prospects headed to the Arizona Fall League, and what is there to know about them? First off, shout out to Low A Lakeland Flying Tigers manager Rene Rivera, who is going to manage the Scottsdale Scorpions in the Arizona Fall League. As for the players, the Tigers are sending 7 prospects to the Arizona Fall League, which starts October 6th, ends November 12th. 3 position players, shortstop Kevin McGonigal, second baseman, third baseman Max Anderson, and infielder Jack Penny. 4 pitchers, right-hander Kenny Surwa, he's the knuckleballer, right-handed reliever Dariel Freggio, left-hander Jake Miller, and right-hander Carlos Laqueria. What do you think about those 7 players going to the Arizona Fall League? We'll get into some of the big names, obviously Kevin McGonigal, Max Anderson, Kenny Surwa, Jack Anderson. But how about those other guys? What do you know about them? And then what do you think about this group as a whole?
They're fun stories. Kenny Surwa, Carlos Laqueria, and Dariel Freggio are all fun stories. They were all undrafted free agents signed. Partially, Laqueria was bounced around in college, ended up in the University of Miami. They signed him after the draft in 2023. Surwa was a guy, he kind of got famous online a little bit because of throwing this really hard knuckleball, the hardest knuckleball ever. And the Tigers signed him. And Freggio is similar. He did a drive line workout and the Tigers signed him shortly after that. Traditionally speaking, I consider those guys org guys. And to explain that, that's basically to be reductive. They're the guys that teams play or pay to play catch with their prospects, if you will. Now, to the Tigers' credit now, and we talked to Ryan Garco a couple of years ago, they don't view players like org guys anymore. They have plans for every single player in the organization. They feel like everybody can get better. And I really think that's been one of the main reasons why they continue to win so much in the minors. So these guys are interesting. Kenny Surwa was 28. It's the knuckleball. You never know with a knuckleballer, right? Like he can go out and throw 6 scoreless or give up 14 hits in 3 innings. Sometimes it matters how windy it is. And Laqueria has a really nice changeup. He actually threw him an immaculate inning just a couple days ago, which is always fun to see. And Freggio is a guy who can really spin the ball well. I don't traditionally think of any of them as prospects, like I said, but this is a great chance for them to go out and prove me wrong and establish themselves as actual names to know in the system.
All right, so the big names, Kevin McGonigal, Max Anderson, Kenny Surwa, Jake Miller, those are names that have kind of already popped off the page a little bit. Kevin McGonigal is the big one, Tigers' #1 prospect. In the minor leagues in 2025, 305 batting average, 19 home runs, 59 walks, 46 strikeouts in 88 games. For Double-A Erie, it's a 254 batting average, 12 home runs, 33 walks, 26 strikeouts in 46 games, posting a .919 OPS. On defense, he has spent all of his time at shortstop at the high A and Double-A levels this season. Why are the Tigers sending Kevin McGonigal to the Arizona Fall League? What are you looking for? And do you think this could be a good opportunity for McGonigal to feel what it's like to play into late October, considering I assume that's what the Tigers are expecting him to do in the 2026 postseason?
Yeah, I think that's certainly part of it. He missed about a month earlier this year with an ankle injury, and he missed time last year with a hamstring and a broken hamate bone in his wrist/hand. So they want him to get some more plate appearances, kind of get up, like you said, closer to what you would expect from a full season at the big league level. And I think they want him to continue working on defense. He's played shortstop all this time. He makes a fair amount of errors and mistakes there. I think he needs more reps. I think they will also probably give him some time at second base and third base in the AFL. They haven't done that in the minors this year just because, they want to get him as many reps at short, but just in case, get him a little taste at other positions. He's played second, plenty in the minors already, but third, not so much. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, you could argue that he doesn't need to go there. He had one of the better Tigers minor league seasons in history. I was looking at it. You mentioned, his 305 line. He finished 300, 400, 500, 300 batting average, 400 on base percentage, 500 slugging. It's the seventh Tigers minor leaguer to do that in the last 30 years. The other ones are it's a mixed bag of names. You got Devin Travis, who was pretty solid big leaguer for a couple of years before injuries ended his career. Ryan Strebe is a name from the past people might remember. He was a first baseman, never made it to the big leagues, but he was fairly highly touted briefly. Then you got Cameron Maybin, who was a top 10 prospect, Curtis Granderson, who ended up okay, Billy McMillan, who was 28 when he did it, so that doesn't count. And then Robert Fick did it twice in the late 90s. So again, it's a mixed bag. But I went a little bit deeper there and just to kind of try not to cherry pick too much, right? McGonigal finished with 19 home runs, more walks than strikeouts. I was like, okay, how many times have we seen that from a minor leaguer, age 23 or younger? McGonigal just turned 21. It was his age 20 season. And I went back to 2008, and these are the only names who have done that at that age, that sort of numbers. Matt Wieters, who was a pretty highly touted prospect, Carlos Santana, Vinny Pasquantino, Marcus Semien, Alex Bregman, Kevin McGonigal.
Those are all dudes.
Yeah. And people have talked about maybe he's a left-handed Alex Bregman, and a lot of things are pointing that way. So yeah, they want him to go out there, get a couple more at-bats, but mostly I think it could be a victory lap for him. I don't even know what you call it, but just a little more time out there. And then I expect him to perform pretty well. Now, sometimes guys are just tired at the end of the year and it doesn't work out, but the AFL, I treat the AFL like numbers after players get drafted. If they do well, that's awesome. If they don't, don't worry about it.
Max Anderson is the other big name on the position player side. Tigers number 9 prospect. He made the jump from AA Erie to AAA Toledo in August. For the Mud Hens, he's hitting .264 with 4 home runs, 7 walks, and 22 strikeouts in 26 games, posting a .740 OPS. He has split time between second base and third base. What do you want to see from him in the Arizona Fall League? Is it just more work at third base to be a potential answer there on the 2026 opening day roster, or at some point early in the 2026 season for the Tigers?
Yeah, and I expect that's probably what we'll see from him. He's played a fair amount of third base down the stretch. He's okay on defense. Like, he doesn't look particularly athletic. It's just kind of his body shape, and he's got glasses, and, not to disparage people with glasses, I wear them, but it doesn't make you look athletic. And, it's just hard to figure out what he is going forward, because he had kind of an underwhelming 2024 season, and he came out and he did nothing but hit this year. There's nothing to complain about there, but he doesn't really offer you any secondary skills. He's not a runner. He'll steal maybe 1-2 bases a year. He doesn't walk, which is a strange thing. He doesn't strike out a ton either. It's like a 15% strikeout rate, but he just, he swings a lot, and he's got plus raw power, but it's kind of often to center or to right center. So it's, 18 home runs is good. 29 doubles, I think. That's solid power, but, it's going to go down every time you go up a level. And so, he really is on offense. He's kind of like Gleyber Torres minus the walks. And, that could be a solid, but the walks are what make Gleyber Torres, I think, really valuable, because, you get on base a ton and that helps. So I would like to see him go out there and maybe work on that a little bit, maybe swing a little bit less. That's probably asking too much. Sometimes guys are just who they are. But yeah, go out there, play some third base, look solid out there, and maybe work on the plate discipline a little bit.
Then we have Kenny Sirwa on the pitching side, 28-year-old knuckleballer. It's a 3.58 ERA with 49 walks and 84 strikeouts across 118 innings in 27 games, 22 starts. For High A West Michigan and AA Erie, for the Seawolves, it's a 3.95 ERA in 82 innings, but he had 41 walks and 50 strikeouts in those 82 innings. Are you sold on Kenny Sirwa as a guy who can help the Tigers in the future just because he offers such a different look with that knuckleball, or does he have a lot more to prove? And what's going on with the strike throwing? Because it was really good at the high A level, and then it's been terrible at the AA level. Is that just happenstance, or is he having trouble locating his stuff?
Yeah, I kind of view that as fairly typical of most knuckleballers. And what I've watched when he's pitched is he's trying to keep the knuckleball down, right? They always say, if it's as a hitter, if you see the knuckleball up, you swing. If it's high, let it fly. If it's low, let it go, right? That's the saying. And a lot of times it is low and they're not swinging at it. He's throwing it. He's trying to locate it to the bottom of the zone. And that leads to a lot of walks. When he's working, the knuckleball's dancing. He's not getting a ton of swing and miss. He's just getting a lot of soft contact, pop-ups, lazy fly balls, ground balls. And I never know what to make of a knuckleballer. I don't know how you scout a knuckleballer. I don't believe in knuckleballers until they're like in their third season of minor or major league success, right? You just don't know. I remember going way back in the day, the Tigers absolutely destroyed R.A. Dickey in a start in the big leagues when he was with the Rangers. I was like, well, that's not going to work. And then a few years later, he's the Cy Young winner. Now, that's pretty rare for a knuckleballer. I think he might be one of the only ones in the last 50 years or so. But yeah, I don't know what to expect from Kenny Sirwa. Honestly, it could go either way. I think for the most part, he's just kind of an innings eater in the minor league level, but we'll see. Maybe they've tweaked something and they can get some more swing and miss, and he's up in Toledo next year, and then Tigers need a starter and he comes up, and who knows, maybe he's baffling big league hitters. I don't see it. The knuckleball doesn't dance a ton to me. It's sometimes you see those clips of like Tim Wakefield and the knuckleball's going everywhere. I don't really see that with him. It's kind of, I don't know, it's up and down, and we'll see what happens, but I'm not expecting a ton.
Jake Miller, the southpaw, he really stands out to me. He went to the Arizona Fall League last year, and he is returning to the AFL this year. He suffered a lower back injury with Double-A Erie in late April. Then he pitched again in late August on a rehab assignment with Low-A Lakeland. When healthy, he has a 1.80 ERA with 4 walks and 21 strikeouts across 20 innings and 4 starts for Erie and 2 starts for Lakeland. So we've seen this guy have success when healthy. The Tigers obviously want him to log more innings this year. But what do you know about Jake Miller, and what could he potentially be for this Tigers team into the future?
Yeah, Miller's the best of the pitching prospects they're sitting out there. We had him in our top 15 in the system. It's really unfortunate this year that he had that back issue, because there's a real chance, had he been healthy, he'd be in the Tigers bullpen right now as a lefty reliever. He's got pretty solid stuff. It's kind of Tyler Holton-ish, if you will. It's like the fastball's like 92, 93. It'll get up to 95, but it's from a tough angle. He hides it well. He's got a good slider, a good changeup, and he just throws a ton of strikes. It's like he had like 12 strikeouts to walks last year. And the problem is, he was out for 4 months. And then in his second rehab start, coming back from this back injury, he got drilled in the back by a 105 mile an hour liner and came out of the game. So I don't know what happened after that. He hasn't pitched since then. We may see Lakeland has 1, possibly 2 more playoff games, so he may pop up in one of those. But this is a guy, they're going to have to add him to the 40-man roster after the season. He was part of the draft, same draft year as Jace Young and Troy Melton, and he may continue on as a starter. It could work like that, but I think he's got a chance to be a really valuable left-handed reliever down the road. And like I said, he might have been there right now if not for the injury. So just get him healthy, get him out there, get some innings, and see what you can do next year.
All right, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're joined by Paul Hoynes, the Cleveland Guardians beat writer for Cleveland.com. Everyone, I'd like to welcome Paul Hoynes, the Cleveland Guardians beat writer for Cleveland.com, to the Days of Roar podcast. It is the second time on the show for Paul Hoynes, who has been covering the baseball team in Cleveland as the beat writer since 1983. We're lucky to have him on once again. Paul Hoynes, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Evan. It's always a pleasure.
Everyone in Detroit is talking about the American League Central with 2 weeks remaining in the regular season. Entering Tuesday, the Tigers had a 6.5 game lead over the Guardians. But as everyone knows, the Tigers and Guardians play 6 games in the next 10 days. The Tigers have 12 games remaining. The Guardians have 13 games remaining. You've seen a lot of baseball over the years. Do you think there's any chance the Guardians pass the Tigers in the AL Central by the time the regular season ends? Is it possible? Will it happen? Is there any chance? Should Tigers fans be worried whatsoever?
Yeah, I think the Tigers are they're in the catbird seat. Obviously, they have the advantage. What their magic number, I believe, is 7 over Cleveland. Even with 6 to play, it's, Cleveland would obviously, they'd almost have to sweep the 6 games to really put some pressure on the Tigers. So I don't think the Tigers need to worry that much, but it's really going to be an interesting, 6 games. The Tigers lead the series right now 4-3. And I was looking at the runs scored and runs against. There's they've scored 21 and and Cleveland has scored 20. So, the difference in the series is like 1 run. So, that's kind of interesting. And they always play each other tough. So I think it'll be, good baseball. But I think the Tigers, definitely have the advantage here.
The Seattle Mariners have won 9 games in a row. But aside from the Mariners, the Guardians are probably the hottest team in baseball right now, winning 4 games in a row. They've also won 8 of their last 9 and 13 of their last 18. What is fueling this late season surge by the Guardians? And maybe the AL Central is not going to happen for the Guardians, but the wild card certainly in play.
Yeah, the wild card is in play. They have it's going to be difficult for them to even to get there. But, what's been fueling them is, the Stephen Vogt and the coaching staff made a decision to go with a 6-man rotation. That starting on this this previous road trip through Boston and Tampa Bay. They added Joey Cantillo to the rotation, and the rotation is, since that move, they've gone 6-0. This is the starters. Gone 6-0 with a 1.72 ERA. So they've really taken to that. They did it mainly because they're playing 17 games in 17 days. They've got a very young rotation, and most of these guys, most of the starters in the rotation have already passed their career highs in innings pitched. So it was done out of that. And I also think it was done to kind of give them just an extra kick in the seat of the pants, so to speak. So, they've responded, and the team has responded.
I want to go back to late August when pitcher Tanner Bybee showed some frustration coming off the mound, and there was that interaction in the dugout with manager Stephen Vogt. Obviously, the cameras picked it up. What happened there in that situation? And is there anything to the fact that the Guardians have won 13 of 18 games since that interaction there?
Bobby is really, really competitive. He hasn't had the year he wanted to have. He signed a big extension in spring training. This is a guy that puts a lot of pressure on himself. He wants to be the ace, but he hasn't pitched like it. So I think there's, that's some of that frustration boiled over. And I think it kind of cleared the air. They've had an interesting relationship, Vogt and Bybee. They have good communication. I think they can yell at each other. They can scream at each other, but it all gets worked out in the end. And, Bybee, in his last start here against the White Sox on Friday night, had his best start of the season. First complete game shutout of his career. A 2-hitter, I believe. Just, pitched very, very well.
I was going to ask about that because you're right. It has been a down year for Tanner Bybee. He had a 3.47 ERA in 2024. In 2025, he has a 4.44 ERA. The strikeouts are down as well. The ERA obviously is up, and that's not what you want. You don't want the strikeouts to be down and the ERA to be up. Not good. What has happened to Tanner Bybee, and is there any hope for him after, like you mentioned, he just threw a complete game shutout with 10 strikeouts against the White Sox?
Yeah, this is a guy that, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong for him. If there's a weird thing that happens behind him defensively, it's happened when he's been on the mound. It's just been one of those seasons. And it's been interesting. He went, I think there was a 7-start stretch where the Guardians went 7-0 when he pitched, but he didn't, I don't think he may have gone, he didn't get those decisions. So at times I think his stat line looks worse than it really is, but he's given up a lot of home runs, which is unusual for him. And I just think he's put a lot of pressure on himself, to be the guy, and I think sometimes that gets in his way.
Well, one guy who might be the guy is Gavin Williams. He has been outstanding with a 3.16 ERA in 29 starts. Now, he leads MLB in walks, which is never a good thing, but he has nearly a 3 ERA. Do you think what he's doing is sustainable, or do you think he needs to cut down on those walks if he wants to be the next ace of the Guardians?
Yeah, he probably needs to cut down on the walks. Definitely. There was a point at one point, I don't know if he still is, but he was leading them, all of big league baseball in walks. But I think he's gotten over that. He's thrown a lot more strikes. He's getting deeper and deeper into games. He flirted with a no-hitter against the Mets, at Citi Field about 4 or 5 starts ago. Took a no-hitter in he lost it with 2 outs in the 9th inning. Alonso hit a home run off him, but since then he's pitched really, really well. It would not surprise me, Evan, if eventually he becomes the ace of the staff. He's, former number 1 pick. Him and Bybee were in the same draft together. Bybee was a 5th round pick and Gavin was a number 1 pick, the 1st round pick. And he's 6'5", 240. He looks like a pitcher.
Another young pitcher who stands out to me is Joey Cantillo, who started the season coming out of the bullpen, but now is in the starting rotation. He just tossed 8 scoreless innings against the Kansas City Royals, and the Tigers are going to see him, I believe, in Tuesday's series opener. What's his story? What can you tell me about Joey Cantillo?
Yeah, Joey Cantillo's one of the guys they acquired in the Mike Clevenger trade way back in 2020 from San Diego. They got, Austin Hedges, Cantillo, Josh Naylor. They got like 12 guys in this deal. You can't even keep track of them anymore. Cantillo and Hedges are 2, and Gabriel Arias, their shortstop, are the 3 guys, kind of main guys still standing. Cantillo, like you said, he opened the season in the bullpen. Then they sent him down to get stretched out at AAA. He came back. He pitched when Luis Ortiz was banged for gambling and put on paid leave on July 3rd. So Cantillo, took Ortiz's spot in the bullpen. He pitched, in the rotation. Then he pitched very well there. Then they wanted to get a look at another lefty, Parker Messick. So they sent Cantillo back to Columbus to work on, controlling the strike zone. His problem is, like Gavin Williams, he tends to walk a lot of people. So they wanted to get him in, and work on his, strike throwing ability. And they did that. And when they decided to go to a 6-man rotation, they brought Cantillo back up and put him in the rotation. And he's pitched very well since then. He's a left-hander. He's got great stuff. They want him to use his fastball more because they said all this guy has to do is throw it over the plate. He does it because he has natural movement. He's a change up slider kind of guy, but they want him to use his fastball more. And that's what he did in his last start. And he was almost unhittable.
We just talked about some of the starters. Let's say that the Guardians are able to get that final wild card spot. How would you feel about their rotation entering a best of 3 wild card series? Who would be the game 1 starter? Tanner Bybee or Gavin Williams? And what would happen after game 1?
Yeah, I think ideally, if they, could set this up ideally, I think the 3 guys would be Bybee, Williams, and probably Slade Ciccone, a pitcher they got from Arizona in the Josh Naylor trade in December. He's pitched really well for them. The question is, what do they have to go through to get to the postseason? They might have to use those guys to, just get to the wild card, to win the wild card. And then, it could be all bets are off. Then perhaps, they're going with they're going with Cantillo to start game 1 or, Parker Messick, who, another young lefty. So it just depends how they set the rotation up and who they have to use, just to get to the wild card.
Shifting gears to the bullpen, we need to talk about the gambling investigation. And it really does go back to 2024 when the Guardians bullpen was just lights out. And that group really fueled their run to the ALCS, which ended in a loss to the Yankees. But in 2025, the Guardians bullpen has been without Luis Ortiz and more importantly, without Emmanuel Clase. Those relievers have not been active because they're both involved in a sports betting investigation. Paul, what has it been like to cover this situation, which has been going on since July? And I guess it was bound to happen, especially with the access to gambling in the digital age. But as you've seen it unfold, what's it been like? And also, what's it been like without Emmanuel Clase in that bullpen?
Yeah, it is. I never thought, to me, it's akin to, the Black Sox scandal in 1919. Really, you haven't had 2 players on the same team, put on paid leave for suspicions of gambling. And, the charges are supposedly related to them influencing prop bets by the way they pitched in games. So, this is a serious matter. And no one has really said a whole lot on this, as you can imagine. People have been quiet about it, but it's an ongoing, investigation. Major League Baseball, in an agreement with the Players Association at the end of August, announced that this is still the investigation will keep going, until further review, So I don't know exactly what that means, but obviously it's going to extend to the regular season. I would think, we'll probably go deep into the off season before there's a resolution, if there is a resolution. But it was a serious blow to the Guardians. Luis Ortiz was the guy they acquired at the winter meetings from Pittsburgh. He was one of their rising stars in the rotation, so they had to replace him in the rotation, and they did a good job with that. Cantillo has done that. Messick has done that. I think they've held their own there. The guy they couldn't replace was Clase. It was, the most dominant closer in baseball for the previous 3 years. 3-time All-Star, 2-time, AL closer of the year. Just a dominant force. And it really set them back for a while. But I think this bullpen is regrouped. Cade Smith has come in and assumed the closer's role. He's 8 for 15, I believe. 8 or 9 for 15. Saves 8 straight saves since, taken over for Class A. And the rest of the bullpen is kind of emerging. Hunter Gaddis, who was a big part of the pen in 2024, has had another great year. Tim Herron is starting to come around. Eric Zabrowski has pitched well. Matt Festa. So they filled in, with a lot of different arms. And I think it's become a strength of the team again.
What was that transition like from Emmanuel Clase to Cade Smith? Obviously, both pitchers were extremely dominant last season, but when Cade Smith goes from being the setup guy to the closer, what was that transition like? Especially because it probably came out of nowhere when Emmanuel Clase got hit and ended up getting pushed to the side, and now he's going to have to wait to figure out what happens in this investigation. But that comes out of nowhere, and then suddenly it's Cade Smith time. How was that transition, and how did Cade Smith handle that?
Cade Smith is, a guy from Canada. Nothing really bothers him too much, but I think, it took him a while to get used to closing. He had closed in the minors for him at AA and AAA, but he had been more like the guy that would come in, in the 5th, 6th, 7th inning when the bases were loaded or there was trouble. This was in 2024 when he made the team. He was kind of that first closer out of the bullpen in an emergency situation. And then Clase would come in the 9th. So he had to make that transition to the 9th inning. It took him a while, but he's a hard thrower. He's got a great forkball or split finger, looks like a forkball. And he's settling into the situation. He's settling into the position now, but it took him a while. And, there was some blown saves along the way, but I think he's getting the hang of the job. He certainly has the stuff.
Aside from Cade Smith, what does the rest of the Guardians bullpen look like? And is this a group capable of making a deep run in October?
I think it is, Evan. I really do. Hunter Gaddis has taken over the role of the setup role, just has done a great job. Zabrowski is a lefty that helps him out. Matt Festa is a guy they picked up in a cash deal from Texas in April. And he's we call him everyday Matt Festa because he seems to pitch every day. And, they've had a lot of different guys. Those are the guys that have kind of reformed that unit in the bullpen. Herron has been up and down a couple times after a great 2024 season. He wasn't throwing enough strikes, but he seems to have gotten his act together again. So, I really think, the bullpen is in pretty good shape if they make the postseason.
We've talked about the Guardians rotation. We've also talked about the Guardians bullpen. So we should probably touch on the Guardians offense. It all starts with 7-time All-Star José Ramírez, doesn't it?
Yeah. And Evan, this is one of the worst offenses I've covered in a long time. I do not know how they are where they are in the standings with this offense. They have the worst batting average in the big leagues. They're hitting like 225 as a team. They're 27th in runs scored. I was trying to compare them to the Tigers, and the Tigers the Tigers are hitting 249. They're 14, with the 14th highest batting average. Cleveland is hitting 225, the worst batting average in the big leagues. They're 27th in runs scored with 580. The Tigers are 7th with 725 runs scored. They've outscored them by almost 200 runs. I mean, it's insane. What is going on here? But they have managed to hang in. They win close games. They're good in extra innings. They're good in 1-run games. And, they ride that starting pitching really, really hard. I mean, this is an offense that is, they're squeeze bunting in the 2nd inning. That because they can't score. I mean, it's amazing to me. It definitely needs to be addressed in the off season, because it's just, they have guys that are still hitting, under 200 and they're starters. These guys they're running guys out there they're hitting 212, under 200, and they've been playing every day.
But to be fair, they also have José Ramírez, and that guy is a difference maker.
Yeah, they do have José Ramírez. Thank God for José Ramírez. He's had another solid season, another all-star season at third base. I think he should be a Gold Glove finalist at third base. He's hit 28 home runs. He's closing in on 80 or 90, maybe 90 RBIs. He's 2 home runs away from having his third 30-30 season. The only player in Cleveland history who has done it more than once. He's just having another great year. He really drives this team. He inspires this team, and they follow his lead. And, Stephen Kwan is hitting in front of him. He's having another solid year. At Gold Glove left fielder, great defensive player, from the leadoff spot. And Kyle Manzardo has come up and really done a nice job for them. In his first full season with the club, they acquired him a couple years ago in a deal with Tampa, and he's hit 26 home runs, got a chance to hit 30, and he's taken over at first base with, the release of Carlos Santana and the trade of Josh Naylor. So he kind of goes back and forth between DH and first base, and has done a nice job for him.
In Detroit, Stephen Kwan is described as a Tiger killer. What impresses you the most about Stephen Kwan as a hitter? And were the Guardians ever close to trading him at the July 31st trade deadline? I know his name was mentioned in some trade rumors.
His name came up a lot. I don't think they were ever really close to trading him. At least that's what I heard. The guy they wanted to trade was Class A, but because of the gambling, the gambling investigation, that took him off the board. So they lose both ways with Class A. They can't use him as a pitcher, and they couldn't trade him and get, if you remember, the closers were going at a premium price at the deadline, and Class A was the best arm out there. They could have got a ton in return, but they end up, losing both ways on that. But Kwan, definitely a good contact hitter. He's starting to steal more bases, Evan. He stole 5 bases against the Rays in a 4-game series there. I think his legs are getting hurt. He has leg problems off and on, but I think they're coming around, and he leads MLB outfielders in assists, really plays a great left field, but he really sets the table at the top of the Guardians lineup. He doesn't walk that much, but he will, he makes so much contact. I think he's hit 10 home runs. He's got a little bit of power, but, he was playing most of the season with a bad wrist that took away, his power stroke, but he still, sprays the ball around and is dangerous when he gets on base.
How about the young kids? You already mentioned Kyle Manzardo a little bit, but also CJ Kefus is an interesting name as well. The minor league numbers there really speak volumes. I wonder if that'll translate to the big league level. How are those guys developing? And are they the future of the Guardians offense? Kyle Manzardo, CJ Kefus.
Yeah, I think they are, definitely. They're part of it at least. Kefus, started the year at AA, worked his way up to AAA, has come up and done a nice job at first base and right field. And, about the last 5 games, he's hit 2 go-ahead home runs. Saturday, his go-ahead 2-run homer in the 8th beat the White Sox, and he did the same thing, I believe, on Thursday night to Kansas City. He's a young guy, still feeling his way, Evan. And they've got a couple guys that if they had stayed healthy, probably would have been up here before him. Chase DeLauder, an outfielder, is recovering from hamate bone surgery, and Juan Brito, a second baseman that just had surgery on for a hamstring injury. I think those guys probably would have been up here before Kefus if they had stayed healthy. So those guys are names to remember too.
Tigers fans probably hate him, but I have to ask about him. Lane Thomas, who hit that grand slam off Tarik Skubal in Game 5 of the ALDS in 2024. He hasn't played since early July. He's been sidelined with a foot injury. Is he going to come back? What's going on with Lane Thomas?
I think Thomas is done for the year. He's had just a terrible year, Evan, because of injuries. He's only played 39 games. This is his walk year, his free agent year. Couldn't have come at a worse time. On a home opener on April 8th, he got hit on the wrist by a pitch that put him on the IL. And since then, he's suffering from plantar fasciitis in his right foot, and he may need surgery for that. So, that was a big blow to this offense because, as you said, he really contributed to them after they got him at the deadline from Washington in 2024, and they were counting on a full season from him this year, and it just hasn't happened.
I want to zoom out for a quick second. At this time last year, the Guardians had an 85-64 record for first place in the AL Central. This year, right now, the Guardians are 78-71 for second place in the AL Central. It's only a difference of 7 wins. But what do you think has happened between 2024 and 2025 that has caused the slight dip in results?
Yeah, I think, the trade of Josh Naylor really set them back. I think they, he was a clubhouse leader. He was a big, 31 home runs, 108 RBIs, hitting behind Ramírez. That really, so taking him out of the lineup, replacing him with Carlos Santana. I love Carlos Santana, but he was 39 and, he had just lost a little bit. This was his third tour with Cleveland, and you just couldn't replace Naylor. And I think that hurt them on the field and in the clubhouse and in the lineup. But, I think the bullpen wasn't as good, obviously. And then, they lose Clase, they lose Luis Ortiz, and the offense has just really never got on track, Evan. This is a tough offense to watch. Offensively, they have struggled from day one, and it's something it has to be addressed in the off season. I think the job Stephen Vogt has done, he won Manager of the Year in 2024, his first year. I think he's done a better job this year, just with getting this record out of this roster. Yeah, he's learned a lot. I think he's learned. Everything was sunshine and roses in 2024. It's not so sunny it hasn't been so sunny this year. I mean, he's been through a ringer, and this is a guy that never managed at any level before the Guardians hired him. But he's done a good job. He's handled it well. You never see him. He's the same guy day to day. Every manager, I guess, has to be that way. But there's never highs or lows with him. He's the same guy. He's done a nice job handling the ball club and getting them through some rough spots. And they've had some injuries. They've had injuries. All clubs have injuries. You don't like to use it as an excuse, but, they've had some of those, but, nothing really that would set you back. I think he's done a good job with the talent that he's been given. And I thought, Evan, that, coming off the season they had last year, they win the division, they beat Detroit in the ALDS, then they take the Yankees to 5 games in the ALCS. I thought the front office should have done more with this club, but they didn't really give Vogt a lot of help. This was just a great time to build on this team, but they didn't increase the payroll. And, so they're kind of getting, this is what they wanted and this is what they're getting.
Before we get you out of here, and we talked about this earlier, but the Tigers and Guardians have 6 games in 10 days. You've seen the Tigers in the regular season and the postseason. What stands out to you about the way these Tigers play baseball, and what are your expectations for these 6 games between the Tigers and the Guardians?
I think they're going to be 6 great games. I really do. I think they're going to be hard fought, close games like they always are. If Tarik Skubal wanted to take those 6 games off, maybe, the Guardians might really have a shot then. But, I was looking at Skubal's numbers, and this year he's faced them twice. They have not scored a run against this guy, an earned run against him. He's 1-0 with 23 strikeouts in 16 innings. So, and I don't know, I guess he's healthy, right? He's got scheduled to start Thursday. So, yeah. And then, they got Flaherty, going, who's always pitched well against Cleveland. He's done a nice job against them. And, Mize, I think, beat him at least once this year. It's going to be a tough matchup for the Guardians. But, I love when these two teams play because, you're getting the best out of both clubs. The Tigers have a lot of power. With Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson. But I think it's going to be a good series. I really do. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know who's going to win, but, the Guardians are in such a tough spot from playing from behind. They I don't know. What do you think? They've got to take at least 5 or 6, right, to have a shot at this? Because there's only 13, 14 games left.
Yeah, not many games left for either side, but you're spot on. Like, if Cleveland wants any chance in the AL Central, they got to take 5 of 6, or they have to take all 6. And never say never. I think Tigers fans look at this Guardians team and they think, well, anything can happen, because we saw what happened last year with the Tigers, where they came out of nowhere and it was, whoa, suddenly the Tigers were in the postseason. No one saw that coming. And in the same way, I think Tigers fans are a little bit worried, like, oh, could this happen to us, but on the other side? Now, I know there's less than 15 games left for both sides, and so it's a little bit different because the Tigers started their run last year in mid-August, but again, anything can happen. We've seen crazy things happen in the game of baseball, and so if we come out of these, six games in 10 days, and if the Guardians are able to take 5 or maybe even all 6 of those games, well, then the AL Central is a complete toss-up.
Yeah, that would be a racehorse cover, and that would be a stretch run they'd talk about for a while. I just don't see it happening, but I think there's going to be all 6 games are going to be very, very competitive.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. All right, Paul, thank you for all the insight about the Cleveland Guardians, and we will see what happens in this 10-game stretch as the Tigers and Guardians are set to play 6 times, with the Tigers currently holding a 6.5 game lead over the Guardians in the American League Central. Once again, thank you for joining the Days of Roar podcast.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me.
Everyone, that was Paul Hoynes, the Cleveland Guardians beat writer for Cleveland.com. We have more to discuss this week about the Tigers with Chris Brown, but first, let's take a break. Thanks again to Paul Hoynes, the Cleveland Guardians beat writer for Cleveland.com. We're back, Evan Petzold, Chris Brown. Let's dig into the Tigers bullpen a little bit, because we do have a big name coming back from injury, and his name is Paul Sewald. He is going to be joining the Tigers bullpen sooner rather than later, possibly as soon as Tuesday's series opener against the Guardians. That's what I would expect. What are your expectations for Paul Sewald as he joins the Tigers? And then also, what's the upside for this guy in the bullpen? We know that he has the fastball and the sweeper. Those are the only 2 pitches that he throws. And the fastball, it sits around 90 miles an hour. So he's not going to be throwing blazing speed with the heater. But at the same time, that sweeper really does miss bats, and he has experience in high leverage situations before. What are your hopes for Paul Sewald, and what could he mean for this bullpen if he is able to perform as we've seen him perform in the past with different teams?
Yeah, I mean, I expect him to come back and pretty much immediately jump into fairly high leverage situations, pitch in 7th, 8th, 9th inning, depending on the situation, typically against whatever opposing team's toughest kind of pocket of right-handed hitters, if you will. And as you said, it's not a lot of velocity, but it's a funky angle, and he just tunnels the fastball and the slider or the sweeper really well. And I think he could be your weapon against right-handed hitters in down the stretch and in the postseason. It's kind of, they bring in Brendan Hanafy to face right-handers sometimes, but he's a contact guy, pitch, get you a ground ball. The Sewald's the guy you want to bring in to get you some swing and miss. And I think he should be able to do that, right? Like, he's done it in the past. You never know. But what I would expect is that he's going to come in, and depending on the situation, he could be pitching the 7th with Will Vest closing in the 9th. He could, if it's a super high leverage situation, maybe Vest comes in the 7th or 8th and Sewald ends up picking up the save. I think they'll use him in that sort of manner where it's high leverage, but just kind of mix and match.
Yeah, this could be a huge boost for the Tigers bullpen. Obviously, the Tigers acquired Paul Sewald from the Guardians at the July 31st trade deadline. He's been sidelined with the right shoulder strain. That's been bugging him pretty much all season, but he completed 4 games on his rehab assignment, 2 with High West Michigan, 2 with AAA Toledo. In those 4 games, he allowed 1 run on 2 hits and 1 walk, with 4 strikeouts across 4 innings. What I really like about Paul Sewald is, yes, he only throws 2 pitches, the 4-seam fastball and the sweeper, but the sweeper is a real bat misser. He also does a good job of throwing strikes. So you have a guy who throws strikes to limit walks and misses bats to generate strikeouts. Those are things you want to see from a high leverage reliever. The only downside is just a lot of fly balls. Like, in his last rehab outing, he allowed 4 fly balls to 4 batters he faced, and one of them went for a home run. But with the swing and miss sweeper, I could see Paul Sewald settling in as the 3rd best reliever in the bullpen, trailing Kyle Finnegan and Will Vest and ahead of Tommy Kahnle and Rafael Montero. Now, we have to mention that Paul Sewald had a 4.31 ERA in 42 games in 2024. And before the injury in 2025, he had a 4.70 ERA in 18 games. The underlying metrics have been better than that, but strictly in terms of how many runs does Paul Sewald allow, he hasn't been an above average reliever since 2023 when it comes to just how many earned runs have you given up in how many innings. So that's a little bit concerning because we know the stuff is solid. We also know the results haven't been there. But at the same time, I think Paul Sewald, with the stuff that he features, can be a steady high leverage reliever for the Tigers. And that would go a really long way for this bullpen. Like a really long way, because you can trust Kyle Finnegan. You can trust Will Vest, but can you really trust Tommy Kahnle? Maybe not. Can you trust Rafael Montero? Definitely not. So imagine going into October being able to trust in Kyle Finnegan, Will Vest, Paul Sewald, and maybe Tommy Kahnle in big moments. That's a lot different than where we were a couple of weeks ago when we could only trust Kyle Finnegan and Will Vest. So I think Paul Sewald joining this bullpen could be a really big boost. Another name we saw too, José Urquidy. He made his Tigers debut in Sunday's game against the Marlins. Do you think he can help this team in the postseason? I mean, it was his first MLB game for José Urquidy since September 29th, 2023 with the Houston Astros. He returned from his second Tommy John surgery on his right elbow. He entered in the 6th inning in Sunday's 2-0 win against the Marlins. He retired 4 of 7 batters, gave up 2 hits, allowed 1 walk, had 2 strikeouts. He left 2 runners on base for Tommy Kahnle to clean up the mess in the 7th inning, which he did. Fastball averaged 93-94, also threw a cutter, curveball, changeup, sinker. So it's a 5-pitch mix out of the bullpen. It's going to be anywhere between 1 to 3 or maybe 4 innings for José Urquidy. I do not expect him to stretch out as a starter until maybe the 2026 season. The Tigers have a team option to bring him back. I expect them to exercise that team option and bring him back for the 2026 season, where maybe he could stretch out as a starter. But for now, 1 to 3 innings. Does this work for you or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a somewhat useful bridge guy, if you will. You know, like you could look at it like at the bare minimum, he's probably an upgrade over Chris Paddock in that role. Or, you know, what Sawyer Gibson-Long had done in his 2 starts before he went back to the IL. I don't know if he's an upgrade over Keider Montero. You know, Keider Montero just pitched really well. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I would expect 1 to 2 innings from him. Maybe if your starter gives you, you know, a short outing or he's looking rough and they want somebody to keep him from the 4th and 5th inning, I think Urquidy could help there. I would not expect to see him in any really high leverage situations. The one other situation I could see where he would help is, you know, the postseason, they don't do the stupid ghost runner on second base anymore, right? They play old school extra inning baseball. And if you need somebody to give you 2-3 innings in the extras, I think he can help there. You know, we'll see. Like I said, I don't know if that's necessarily an upgrade over Keider Montero, and maybe he doesn't even make the postseason roster, but it's worth it to give him a couple shots down the stretch to see if he can help. Yeah,
we still have 2 weeks left in the regular season. And I think for José Urquidy, the command will dictate if the Tigers put him on the postseason roster. He needs to be in the strike zone all the time. That's what makes him really good. When he's throwing strikes and he's in the zone and he's not walking batters, that's when José Urquidy can be effective. He's going to have to do that over the final 2 weeks to earn himself a spot on the postseason roster. Let's shift gears from the bullpen to behind the plate. And we're not going to talk about Dylan Dingler. As much as everyone likes to talk about Dylan Dingler, we're going to talk about Jake Rogers. Is Jake Rogers undervalued? And just to set the stage for what he has done this season, and I'm not talking about what he's done behind the scenes or what he's done from a game calling standpoint. I'm talking about the data that we have in front of us. Jake Rogers hitting 200 with a 650 OPS in 43 games, hitting 368 in his last 7 games, but it's been 7 games in 3 weeks. And in one of those games, he didn't get an at-bat. So it's really like 6 games in 3 weeks, but still, those 6 games in the last 3 weeks, Jake Rogers hitting 368. He's below average in blocks, below average in caught stealing, above average in framing, and above average in pop time, all according to the StatCast data. And we know he's a glue guy behind the scenes. I'll ask you, is Jake Rogers undervalued? Because there's been a lot of hype about Dylan Dingler, and rightfully so, because Dylan Dingler has played great. He deserves it. He's established himself as the number 1 catcher. But I feel like that kind of kicks Jake Rogers to the side for a lot of people. And I do think that he maybe is still a very valuable piece to the Tigers, not only this year, but maybe moving forward as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely think he's undervalued. I don't think, at least in the mind of the average fan, right? I don't think he's undervalued to the Tigers at all. I think AJ Hinch loves him. I think Scott Harris loves him. I think they know what he brings. I think the rest of the team knows what he brings. I brought this up a little bit because, you know, Tigers Minor League Report, if you're not familiar with us, a lot of what we do is just post clips on Twitter. And we don't post clips of guys striking out or making errors. Like every now and then we do just to be like, hey, these guys aren't perfect. Mostly we post clips of guys doing things that are good, home runs and such. And a guy named Eduardo Valencia has kind of popped up out of nowhere this year. He was basically an organizational catcher, like when I talked earlier about org guys. And then this year, randomly at 25, he blew up in the minors, AA, AAA. He's hitting 308 this year with 23 home runs and 354 at bats. And he's a catcher / first baseman. So people keep saying, hey, bring this guy up, get Rogers out of here. And my partner Rogelio went and actually talked to Gabe Alvarez, the AAA manager, and found out, like, Valencia is not really a great defender. He needs a lot of work on defense at catcher and first base. And I think that that's a huge factor because I don't think AJ Hinch is ever going to roster a catcher who can't play defense. And if he does, it's not going to be for very long. Like, remember Wilson Ramos? Yeah, it doesn't last very long. And Jake Rogers is still a terrific defensive catcher. He's a 202 career hitter. That's what people see, right? But I look at the things like he got hurt and lost his job and he hasn't complained. Like, and people who say, oh, he can't complain. He's a terrible hitter. You can complain. He's one of the few Tigers catchers in history with a 20 home run season on his ledger. Like there haven't been that many, but to understand that he has a role in this team and, not complain about losing his job and playing once a week now, I think that's a huge factor. And keeping the clubhouse in order and all the stuff behind the scenes that the backup catcher does, help with pitching game plans, all that stuff. I think it's a huge factor. And just the final point, just to prove what a defensive catcher means to Major League Baseball teams, I was looking at some other guys. Jeff Mathis is a career 194 hitter, or was a career 194. He played for 17 years in the big leagues because they could count on his defense as a backup catcher. Austin Hedges is still playing. He's a 184 career hitter. He's in year 11. So this is what teams actually value with these guys. Don't look at batting average for a backup catcher. Just ignore it and look at the way that they play on the team.
Yeah. And again, going back to Dylan Dingler, just don't want to take anything away from him because what he's done has been nothing short of incredible. Hitting 281, over a 750 OPS, 13 home runs. I mean, he could finish with 15 homers this year if he has a good final 2 weeks. He's been outstanding behind the plate, whether it's blocking, whether it's caught stealing, whether it's framing. But how about game calling? Dylan Dingler's learned a lot from Jake Rogers, right? Jake Rogers has led Dylan Dingler into this role, and he's done it selflessly. To your point, Jake Rogers could have been pissed, but he wasn't. Jake Rogers handled it like a true pro, and that's exactly what he is. And if Dylan Dingler were to go down with an injury, let's just say, God forbid that happens because the Tigers need Dylan Dingler, but if he were to go down, the Tigers can fully trust Jake Rogers behind the plate. Whether it's the final 2 weeks of the regular season, the postseason, into the 2026 season, the Tigers absolutely would not trust Eduardo Valencia behind the plate if Dylan Dingler were to go down with an injury. So just to further your point of like the call him up crowd of get Valencia up here, get rid of Rogers, like it's just not that easy. And that's not really what teams look at. Jake Rogers is an important piece of this team, not only with what he does on the field, but also with what he does behind the scenes. Before we get out of here, we got to touch on some injury updates. Kyle Finnegan, Sawyer Gipson-Long, Matt Vierling, and Brant Hurter. We already talked about Paul Sewald, whom we're expecting to join the Tigers for Tuesday's series opener against the Guardians in return from a right shoulder strain. So we're going to skip him and we're going to go right to the big name, right-handed reliever Kyle Finnegan. He hasn't pitched for the Tigers since August 31st, but he projects to return within the next 7 days from a right adductor strain. He is eligible to return to the Tigers on Tuesday. I don't think he's going to be activated for Tuesday's series opener. He threw an 18-pitch bullpen session on Saturday and didn't feel any soreness on Sunday. That's a really good sign. He's going to throw another bullpen, and then we could see either a rehab assignment or a simulated game. After that, he will return to the Tigers. So we're not going to see Kyle Finnegan on Tuesday, but he could join the Tigers within the next 7 days, which is definitely the best case scenario. I know we were worried that he might be out until the postseason begins, but he seems likely to return. If I had to guess, I'd say September 23rd, which would give him 7 days to get settled in again before the end of the regular season and 11 days until the start of the ALDS. Then we have right-hander Sawyer Gipson-Long. He's back on the injured list with neck stiffness after he got lit up by the Yankees in New York, allowing 7 runs over 2 1/3 innings. He already spent June 29th through August 13th on the injured list with neck stiffness. So this is a recurring issue for him. He missed like 6 weeks last time. So if the Tigers were counting on him for the postseason, they might need to look elsewhere. Outfielder Matt Vierling is making his comeback from a left oblique strain. He started a rehab assignment Friday with AAA Toledo. The door is open for his return. I think he would replace Trey Sweeney on the roster whenever he is ready to return. If I had to guess, I think we could see both Matt Vierling and Kyle Finnegan on September 23rd, giving them 1 week of games before the end of the regular season. Then we have left-handed reliever Brant Hurter. He continues to progress in his return from a lower back injury. He has pitched in 3 games for AAA Toledo, and he hasn't walked any batters over 3 2/3 innings. That's the key. Remember, the Tigers sent Brant Hurter down because he was walking too many batters. The Tigers are planning on bringing him back at some point, probably sooner rather than later. If he dials in that command, Brant Hurter could be the X factor for the Tigers in the postseason. So some big names there. Kyle Finnegan, Matt Vierling, Brant Hurter, all players who could factor into the Tigers in the postseason. Of those 3 names, Chris, before we get out of here, is there one name that you're most interested in? Kyle Finnegan, Matt Vierling, Brant Hurter.
I think it's got to be Finnegan, right? Like he was a revelation for them after the trade deadline, and it just extends that bullpen even more. You get Finnegan back and he's pitching the way he was, and Vest bumps down an inning. Sewald comes in, bumps down an inning. And Hurter, I think, is going to be a big factor too. So I think Finnegan's the big one, but yeah, they all 3 of them could help, obviously.
All right, let's get out of here. Thanks to Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report for co-hosting with me this week. And thanks to everyone out there for listening to the latest episode of Days of Roar. Please like, rate, share, and subscribe. Drop us a rating and comment what you think about the show. Stick with freep.com/sports for the latest Tigers coverage. I would like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, sports editor Bill Bradley, and our magical producer, Robin Chan. For the Detroit Free Press, I'm Evan Petzold. We'll catch you next week. Until then, go in peace.